Hello everyone, my name is Michael and this is my wonderful dog Luna. Today we are going to talk to you about our journey walking across Canada to help raise money and awareness for the Scottish Rewilding charity Trees for Life. Over the past year of 2021, we have successfully walked across the North American continent, from the west coast of Vancouver Island on the Pacific Ocean to the east coast of Newfoundland on the Atlantic. Today we'll be exploring some of the reasons behind this journey, some of the challenges faced, and share with you some of our stories from along this road. And I really hope you enjoy this talk. First of all, the reasons why. Climate change. Right now we are in the midst of a global climate crisis. The effects of climate change are being seen now in an ever more frequent and terrifying capacity, including droughts, wildfires, flash floods, and extreme temperature fluctuations. And this is being seen all over the world. And sadly, this is going to get much, much worse if we don't take serious and immediate action. This journey was born out of a place of hope. The reality we are facing with climate change is sadly one of doom and gloom. But as scary as it is, we can fix this. And one way we can do this is through taking radical action. To quote David Attenborough in a recent address to Parliament on the subject of climate change, we cannot be radical enough in dealing with these issues. The other way we can fix this is through the process of rewilding, which essentially is the restoration of the natural world, the replanting of native woodlands, the restoring of habitats, and the reintroduction of species. And a good place to start, I think, is right here in our backyards in Scotland. So, my relationship to Scotland. I am from Scotland. I live in a place called Dunkeld, and I love Scotland. I love being outdoors. I love being in nature. I love the way it makes me feel, and like so many others, the outdoors has always been something I have turned to in my life, and it has given me so much. I could rant and rave about the benefits of spending time outdoors and connecting with nature, of getting out and going for a walk. But through that connection, and for as long as I can remember, I've always felt Scotland, and particularly the Scottish Highlands, to be somewhat of a sad landscape, barren and bleak. And for me, that feeling of sadness really hit home in finding out that Scotland shouldn't look like that. That Scotland should be absolutely bursting with life, was once forested from coast to coast, and was host to a much wider degree of wildlife and species than we currently are seeing. So why Canada? This was for a number of reasons. Firstly, my own sense of curiosity and adventure. Canada has some of the world's largest remaining and relatively untouched wilderness left in the world. And to be able to come and get a sense of that and encounter some of the wildlife and wilderness that they have here was very important to me. And I had some absolutely amazing encounters in our time here. But mainly it's to tie into the history of the Scottish landscape and the people who belong to that land. As well as there being an absence of trees and wildlife in the Highlands, there is also the absence of many of its original inhabitants, in the thousands upon thousands of Scots removed from their lands and homes during a period known as the Highland Clearances. Many of whom would end up in Canada, along with so many other Scots, who would eventually settle in the West and make Canada their home. So, very much trying to tap into the Scottish-Canadian heritage through this journey, and this would end up being a very powerful thread in the telling of this story. So this all started way back in 2019. This is where I dreamt it up, whilst walking out in Torridon in Westeros on the west coast of Scotland. And I shared the idea at that time with my brother Jamie, who gave me the most beautiful reaction of, "Oh, it's a great idea, Mike," along with this wonderful look of genuine fear and a kind of, oh my goodness, he's lost his mind, and he's probably not wrong. And about a year later, after working hard and saving some money, I was ready to go in March of 2020. Sadly, that was also the arrival of the pandemic, so those plans got put on the back burner. But it worked out for the best, as it resulted in me meeting Luna. I had headed to Canada and continued to work and save money towards the journey, and I was lucky enough to land a wonderful job for the winter in Banff National Park, working with sled dogs. There were around 70 dogs at that kennel that I had the absolute pleasure to look after and care for in my time there, and I also got a chance to do a bit of mushing, which was wonderful. I'd previously thought about the idea of a dog for the trip, but I think I had previous concerns about how a dog might cope with the journey. But spending time working with and getting to know the Alaskan Husky put my mind at ease. These dogs are amazing. They're hardy, they're bred for extreme distance, used to sleeping outdoors and being nomadic. So it's almost the perfect dog for taking on a challenge like this. It was also amazing to hear some of the stories and the history of these dogs, how we as humans utterly depended on these animals for our survival, and how they were essential in the settling and the exploration of North America. And I felt very lucky in getting to experience this big part of Canadian culture at the same time. But out of all these incredible dogs, Luna was the one. A friendship was made, and at the end of the season I was very, very kindly allowed to have her. And so we set off for the start of our walk. And the start of our walk was to be the town of Tofino on Vancouver Island. As well as it being one of the most westernmost points in Canada, it is also a place known as the end of the road. And I think I was drawing parallels there in regards to where we are in facing up to climate change. We are at the end of the road. We need to take action now. And so it seemed like a very apt place to start this journey from. A question I often get asked though is, what were you thinking before you set off? On one hand, from the moment the idea came to me, you're thinking this is amazing, everything aligns beautifully with my values, and I believe in the message. There's also this huge other side that is screaming at you. What on earth are you doing, Michael? Are you actually going to do this? Anything and everything could go wrong. What if we don't raise any money? What if this is a total waste of time? And I was having a very similar mixture of thoughts on the 1st of March 2021. Stood on the dock at Tofino in the pouring rain, wearing my kilt with my guitar on my back and with Luna by my side. It is so incredibly hard to convey to you all what this trip was like in such a short talk. Luna and I would eventually spend over 9 months crossing a continent through vastly changing landscapes, through the Rockies of British Columbia, flatlands of southern Alberta, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, with huge open skies, farmlands and grasslands that made you feel as though you were out at sea. We watched as the land became greener and greener into the wilds of northern Ontario, through boreal forest and the Canadian Shield, and watched as the trees merged from evergreens to hardwoods, from Ontario into Quebec, whilst witnessing the turn of the leaves and the beautiful autumn colours. Eventually we would get our first smell at the Atlantic as we walked along the mighty St. Lawrence River and on into Atlantic Canada, through New Brunswick, Nova Scotia and eventually Newfoundland. We walked all day, resting when we needed to. We slept outdoors in all sorts of places. We used a tarp to keep the rain and snow off, but for the most part we would just put down a roll mat and jump into our bivvy bag. We slept in forests and fields, barns, stables and sheds. We experienced beautiful encounters with wildlife and people alike. We met bears and we heard wolves howling. We experienced countless beautiful sunrises and sunsets. We walked at night under huge starry skies. In the cities we slept in shop fronts, park benches, graveyards, church steps. We slept wherever we could find, and we were often tired. Days differed hugely. Some days we walked strongly and we felt great. We sang songs, totally in love with what we were doing. Other days were, for a lack of a better word, brutal. Your body hurt, your feet bled, loneliness was definitely felt, and the weight of the task we had taken on quite often sat heavily, and I am unashamed to say a few tears were shed along the way. And we definitely thought of quitting more than once. To go back to the start of our journey and to give you a sense of distance and the vastness of this country, by the time we had crossed Vancouver Island, we'd already walked much further than the equivalent distance of the West Highland Way. And we hadn't even set foot on mainland Canada yet. Crossing Vancouver Island was a really good early test. It took us around a week to cross the island, an island which is a temperate rainforest definitely lived up to its name. It absolutely chucked it down. As we were passing through the town of Port Alberni, we saw some TV cameras set up on the side of the road. We wondered what was going on. As it turned out, it was us. And then this happened.
If you live on the Mid-Island, you may have already spotted him walking along the side of the highway, a Scottish man in a kilt with his dog. He's been living in Canada for the past 8 months and has decided to walk right across this country to raise money for a cause close to his heart. CTV's Gord Kurbis has his story.
He is far from his Scottish home and has spent the last few days walking in the pouring rain. But Michael Yellowlees doesn't appear to mind.
It's pretty miserable weather, to be fair. But I'm quite enjoying it, to be honest. It's nice getting out even and getting the wind in your face.
Yellowlees is passing through Port Alberni today. He's on day 5 of a journey that will see him walk more than 8,000 kilometres across Canada.
So it's going to take me a good wee while. I'm hoping I'm going to manage it before winter comes next year. So I'll be walking pretty much for the full year.
He did a previous walk across India a few years ago, which he says was for a personal journey. This time it's to raise funds for a charity in his Scottish homeland called Trees for Life.
You'll visit the Highlands and you'll see they're very barren and very bare. And basically what Trees for Life trying to do is trying to restore the Caledonian pine forest.
He's also trying to raise awareness for Canadians to appreciate the nature we have surrounding us. He and his dog Luna began their journey in Tofino, a place known as the end of the road.
I like the sound of that, leaving from the end of the road, but also with what I'm doing, it has a bit of a metaphor to it in regards to we're kind of at the end of the road in regards to the environment. We need to be doing stuff about this now. As
a former fitness instructor, he's up for the journey and knows his companion Luna is as well.
She's used to running 100 miles a day, really, with sled dogs, so she's finding it quite easy right now. She's just sauntering. I'm struggling along behind her, but she's doing very well.
The pair are inviting the public to follow their journey and contribute to the cause through their website, the link for which can be found on our website. Gord Kurbis, CTV News, Port Alberni.
This was to be a hugely welcome bit of news coverage for us, as although I'd hoped our story would gain some attention, I didn't think it would happen until much later on in the walk. This was also a hugely memorable 24 hours for us. Right after we met with the TV cameras, we climbed the hill known as the Hump out of Port Alberni, which took us up to the very aptly named Cathedral Grove, which is a stand of utterly gigantic Douglas firs, which is amazing to see. It was like you're suddenly in another world, or somehow the wrong size. Amazing, amazing trees. It was, though, very, very wet. We had a very, very wet night's sleep and we were totally soaked. The next morning, however, the news story had obviously gone out and it was like our lives had turned into a movie. We had cars driving past, honking their horns, people waving from their car windows, people stopping for selfies, people bringing us packages of food and treats for Luna. The response was absolutely amazing. People were beautifully, beautifully kind, and it was this sort of human kindness that was to be one of the biggest parts of what made this trip so incredible. The huge community that sprung up around me and Luna was wonderful. We continued to receive help all along the way, with donations of food and offers of places to stay or to grab a shower, and that went on right the way throughout Canada. And it was so warmly received and very needed at so many points along the way. Yeah, we would have really struggled to do it without that support. So yeah, big thank you to everyone who helped us along. Online, we were getting more and more of a following as well. We updated as regularly as we could with photos, written updates and songs. And the messages of support absolutely poured in from all over Canada and Scotland, but also all around the globe as well, from all over the place. And our journey really seemed to be striking a chord with so many people. And I actually had people crying to me on a surprisingly regular basis, and many was through their own despair with the lack of action on climate change, and so they're moved by the action that me and Luna were taking, which was really, really beautiful. In Canada as well, the wilderness that I'd come to see is hugely under threat, and the walk highlighting Scotland's need for rewilding worked as a beautifully double-edged sword in reminding Canadians how special their landscape is. We had beautiful messages as well on a more personal and human level, from people battling cancer and people suffering from depression and anxiety, and also just lovely messages from people letting me know that Luna and I had inspired them to get up and do that thing that they had always wanted to do, which was amazing, and ultimately what we were trying to do, trying to inspire people along the way. All these stories and encounters definitely gave us strength, and kept us going through some of those tougher days that we had. I think this reaction as well highlighted for me that what we were doing was something very special, and ultimately something bigger than I had originally anticipated before setting out. Even with these encounters, however, we did spend a huge amount of time by ourselves. The hardest part of this trip was definitely the mental side of things. Get up and walk all day, sleep outside, do it again, do it again, do it again. And as much as I love the outdoors, that is still pretty tough. So I'm going to talk about Luna. There are 1,000 stories about man's best friend, and Luna is definitely that to me. In regards to her helping me on this walk, she was just about everything. She was my constant companion. She was who I spoke to every day. She put up with me as I talked to myself, and she made me laugh all the time. Over and above that, she was also my four-legged personal trainer. She was the one who got me out of my sleeping bag in the morning, licked me in the face, and shouted at me to get moving. And she was just awesome. She was always ready to go. She loved being on the move, smelling new smells, jumping around in the grass on the side of the road and trail. And she padded along just as enthusiastically at the end of the day as she did at the start. Even when she misbehaved slightly, she was a help. She would pull in her lead, but at the same time she'd pull me out of the headspace that I'd fallen into if I was struggling. And, you know, she'd give me a wee pull and it just pulled me back into the moment, which was beautiful. She did, however, give me and many others a really, really big fright. It was certainly the biggest fright I've ever had in my life. Throughout this journey, we were following a mixture of highways, minor roads, and what is known as the Great Trail or the Canadian Trail, which is a network of walking routes that sort of joined up across Canada. As you get into Ontario, however, the walking trail continues as a canoe route, following a series of big lakes and waterways. And due to the lack of shoulder on the highways in this part of Ontario, we took to the water, and we planned to paddle around 700 kilometres from Kenora on Lake of the Woods down to Thunder Bay. Sadly, all did not go to plan. All was going well, and minus the mosquitoes and black flies that were testing us, we were very much enjoying the journey. The route took us through some pretty remote parts, and I was thoroughly enjoying the experience. We had some amazing encounters along this period as well, with bears, otters, beavers, and an abundance of bird life, which was lovely to see. And we found a brand new meaning to the word serenity. Paddling was one of the nicest ways to travel. It was lovely being on the water. But yeah, however, around 300 kilometres into this section, things got a bit scary. We approached a portage that took us from the end of Bear River into Namakan Lake. I put Luna back onto her lead and got ready to lift the canoe out of the water to carry it over into the lake. And at this point, I don't know if Luna saw something or if she got spooked, but she jumped from the boat and took off into the forest and disappeared into the undergrowth, which was not a lot of fun. If anyone's lost a dog, you'll know how it's not the greatest feeling. at this point we were also incredibly remote. The wilderness around us was really dense, and Luna was in there somewhere, and I feared snagged on her lead. Hey. Obviously she's sitting here with me now, so things, she came back, but she ended up being missing for 7 days and 7 nights in a very remote part of northern Ontario. On the morning of day 8, she wandered back into camp, minus her lead, and apart from being a little bit tired and a little bit hungry, she was acting as though nothing had happened at all, which wasn't the case for me. I had a very, very stressful week. Yeah, definitely the scariest week of the trip. Obviously there's so much more about that story I could tell you, the amount of support we received, etc. But yeah, for now I think it stands just to sort of highlight what an amazing dog she is, to survive 7 days, 7 nights trapped in sort of, in the wilderness. And so the adventure continued. I'm going to talk to you now. There is a song by the Proclaimers called Letter from America. If you go, will you send back a letter from America? Take a look down the rail track from Miami to Canada. The song is a lament to the people who left Scotland, and the song has actually been pretty influential in the creation of this whole story. The song starts, I broke off from work the other day. I spent the evening thinking about all the blood that flowed away across the ocean to the second chance. I wonder how they got on when they reached the promised land. And by the looks of things, they did all right. Scottish names and name places were everywhere across Canada. In street signs, towns, rivers, MacLeods, McGregors, Frasers, places like Aberdeen, Inverness, Lochaber, it was everywhere. And yeah, so in that sense, it was everywhere you looked, there were things to remind you of home, which I felt was poignant. I kind of expected the name places, having checked maps before leaving to go to Canada. But what I don't think I fully expected is how strongly the sense of Scottish identity lives on in Canada, and how deeply it's felt in a huge section of the Canadian populace. I would meet third and fourth generation Canadians who have never been to Scotland, but still held a deep longing for their homeland. So yeah, sort of ancestrally, this is their pool, that is their home. To highlight that further, and what really amazed me, even whilst we were still in some of the western provinces, I had people stopping at the road and speaking in Gaelic to me, and it happened a number of times throughout my trip, which I felt was quite powerful. The fact Luna and I chose to walk west to east wasn't accidental. We chose to walk eastwards, one, as it felt like walking home. Every step we were getting closer to home and the place we love and the people we love, which was beautiful. But also by walking eastwards, in a sense, I felt like it was a reversal of that great movement west. And it was also to sort of ask these Scottish Canadians to give back to that ancestral homeland. Another line from the song Letter from America goes, I wonder my blood, when will you return to help us kick the life back into a dying mutual friend? And a lot of these Scottish Canadians got behind Luna and I in sensational fashion. Donations flooded in online with messages such as for our Scottish roots or for our homeland. Welcoming parties came out to greet us and cheer us on, waving saltires and maple leaves. Pipers welcomed us through towns and cities, including in the nation's capital of Ottawa, where we were welcomed into the city by 2 different pipe bands and a whole host of well-wishers. Fundraising events were organised for us, and we spread the word of Rewilding in Scotland. Nights of music where I was entertained listening to songs and fiddle tunes, songs that I've heard played so many times before at home in Dunkeld, along with a lot of other songs I hadn't heard, and they were Scottish songs. By the end of this walk, I had felt I had tapped into something really powerful. In Nova Scotia, where on a sub-note, the road signs are in Gaelic, and we got to see for the first time the Works Atlantic, which obviously was an amazing experience after months and months on the road. But we had what was an incredibly powerful experience of being allowed onto the Hector. The Hector was a ship that carried some of the first settlers from Scotland to Nova Scotia. And although the centre was closed for the season, it was very kindly opened up for Luna and I. And the Heritage Centre took you through some of the history of the horrific voyage of those settlers, the false promises made to them, and some of the hardships they endured on their arrival to Nova Scotia. This amazingly powerful experience. Another line from the song is, "I stood by the ocean, tried hard to imagine the way you felt the day you sailed from Westeros to Nova Scotia." And I think that line was in my head when I was in Torridon in 2019, looking out onto the ocean, and it sort of stayed with me. It sort of spawned this idea, and again, very powerful experience. Here I was, sat on board a ship that had carried many of them away, and so trying to imagine that arriving on those shores was again a very amazing experience for me. Obviously, we've had 9 months of very tough going on the road. We have 1,000 stories to tell from this journey, encounters with wildlife, friendships that we've made, and moments that I will remember for the rest of my life. We reached the easternmost point in Canada on the 5th of December. To a throng of supporters, lots of people came down to cheer us on finishing on that final day, and we received letters of congratulations from world leaders, including Nicola Sturgeon and also Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We gained huge amounts of news coverage throughout our journey that not only promoted greatly the need and the desire for rewilding in Scotland, but in the same breath was a show of passion in the necessity for greater action on climate change. We have managed to raise over £50,000 for the charity Trees for Life, and that will affect real change in planting trees and making a change to a landscape that not only I love so much, but that so many people love so much. And in completing this journey and sharing this story with you, or a part of this story with you, I hope that it will stand as an example of the power of taking action. I didn't know whether what we were going to do was going to make any difference or capture any imaginations, but it definitely has. So I ask you, if you can, to think about how you can affect positive change. Think about what you're good at, and think about what you love, because these will be your weapons in this fight. Take those things, use them, and see where it takes you. But get radical and inspire others. Sadly, we have a long, hard road ahead of us in dealing with the global climate crisis. It is not going to disappear overnight, but we will get there. And we might just have the adventure of a lifetime along the way.